Once again, the telecoms giant MTN has been named Africa's top brand. Petrus de Kock, the research manager for Brand South Africa, joins us on the line. Petrus, you're in Kenya at the moment.
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, we're actually doing quite a bit of research here on South Africa's image and perceptions in the Kenyan market. So that's where we are today.
We were told by your publicity people that you're also meeting with the head of Brand Kenya. They've got some interesting challenges.
Yes, we had a meeting with them this morning and a very, very interesting discussion. It's like a discussion among African colleagues, in just learning how they work as an organization, how we do our work. And also, I think the important thing that brings us to Kenya is for South Africa, we have such a presence in the market, that we're trying to do a bit more of an assessment of that kind of holistic footprint, government to government business. And for interest's sake, we've been picking up a lot of interest in South African music. So our culture is also a very strong element of our presence in the market here. It's a very interesting learning exercise.
In years gone by, Kenya was seen as a bit of a competitor for South Africa. The tourism market in particular from Europe and North America might go on safari either to this country down south or to where you are right now. And yet you do like to help each other.
I think that's an interesting part of the discussion we've been having with lots of people. We had a session, for example, this morning with Kenyan editors. And, I think a healthy competition between African countries is actually a good thing, because in a way it inspires us to all, become better at what we do. And that also creates more opportunities for us, in terms of business, in terms of more interaction, as we have expansion in the African market. In South Africa, in Kenya, in Ghana, Nigeria, and other markets, that creates more space also for our companies to interact with each other. The interesting thing for us in this research is, when we talk on African issues like integration, we often speak about infrastructure, or we speak about port issues or bottlenecks at harbors and so forth. But just as big an obstacle is actually perception. It's the soft issues. It's what we think of each other. I think that creates a lot of kind of invisible hurdles. So this research that brings us to Kenya, this year we are focusing on Kenya, Ghana, and Nigeria in doing more concrete on-the-ground research, is really to identify those kind of perceptual barriers. It's the weird stuff we think about each other that actually prevents us from getting into more substantive, not only conversations, but to create real relationships. I think it's called out in the National Development Plan that we have to expand our intra-African trade. It's called out in the AU and all these platforms. So what we are actually at least trying to achieve through the research is say, but what are those issues that prevent us, from creating better relationships and more interaction, basically.
Petrus, I know it's a little unrelated to what you're doing in Kenya, but I have to mention that I've got you on the line, the magnificent advert that you guys put together on South Africa with the blind man, which has gone viral all over the world on YouTube. Has its success been greater than your whole team anticipated?
I think that was the SA Tourism campaign. We also did one in the same time around 20 years of democracy. And yes, that advertisement has had a huge impact, and I think that's one tool, that kind of audio-visual, putting it into your television channels and so forth. But, the interesting thing that we are learning here in the Kenyan market, is South Africa is quite a sophisticated market with so many different offerings, that we also have to become, we need to use those kind of instruments, as you say, but at the same time, we also need to create a much more nuanced kind of a messaging strategy or communication strategy with our African peers, just to get, sometimes we also need to do a bit of a reality check, in terms of how we are seen, so we have to use the television platforms, but at the same time, how do you actually reach your decision makers? How do you kind of create a high level of familiarity with South Africa in our African peer environment? We find in Kenya, through our research, quite a high level of familiarity with the country. But then you look at other markets, like in Nigeria, for example, there isn't such a high level of familiarity. So the challenge would be, do you use a television advertisement or do you use other platforms? Do we need to do more partnerships between South African government and business in the markets, to create a kind of a bigger conversation on the country in those markets? So that's what we're trying to assess and trying to get to a deeper understanding, of as a country, how do we position ourselves in the African context.
Interesting job you've got, Petrus de Kock, who's the research manager for Brand South Africa.